The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that made Jimin grip her seat. Through the viewport, she saw the massive ring of the Galactic Archive Station, spinning slowly against the darkness of space. Below it, the dead world of Velnar Prime turned in silence, its surface covered in the ruins of a civilization that had vanished 2 million years ago. Captain Hyun's voice crackled through the intercom. "We'll dock in 15 minutes, Dr. Park. Welcome to the edge of known history." Jimin pressed her hand against the cold glass. She had spent 3 years applying for this position, competing against candidates from 24 alien species. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 20 years ago, and spots on prestigious research teams were rare for humans. Most alien species still saw Earth's people as newcomers barely worth noticing. The docking procedure took another 30 minutes. When Jimin finally stepped through the airlock into the station, she found herself in a corridor that curved upward in both directions. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth standard. A tall reptilian figure waited for her, its scales shifting through shades of deep purple and blue. "Dr. Park," the alien said, its voice emerging from a translation device around its neck. "I am High Scholar Vexthar. I oversee this research facility." Jimin bowed slightly, remembering the proper gesture for Velkrite people. "Thank you for accepting my assignment, High Scholar. I'm honored to join your team." Vexthar's eyes, which sat on the sides of his head, both focused on her. "You come highly recommended by your human colleagues. However, I must be clear, this is not Earth. We have been studying the first ones for 40 years. We expect new team members to observe and learn before offering opinions." "Of course," Jimin said, though the words stung a little. "I'm here to learn." The High Scholar led her through the winding corridors. They passed laboratories where researchers from different species worked over ancient fragments. An insectoid chithin carefully cleaned a piece of pottery. A floating methane breather examined something inside a sealed tank. Everyone moved with quiet purpose. "The first ones were the oldest civilization we have discovered," Vexthar explained as they walked. "They spread across 300 star systems before they vanished. We still do not know what destroyed them. Their technology was far beyond anything we possess today." They entered a large circular chamber. At its center, on a platform surrounded by scanning equipment, sat a crystalline tablet about the size of Jimin's torso. Even from the doorway, she could see complex patterns carved into its surface. The crystal caught the light and threw rainbow colors across the walls. "This is our most recent find," Vexthar said, "recovered from a temple complex on Velnar Prime just 6 months ago. We believe it has religious significance." Another researcher approached them, this one an insectoid with iridescent wings and multiple limbs. "High Scholar, the spectral analysis is complete. The patterns appear to be purely decorative, as we suspected." "Thank you, Scholar Nira," Vexthar said. He turned back to Jimin. "You see? Beautiful but ultimately meaningless. The first ones loved complex geometric designs. We find them everywhere in their ruins." Jimin stepped closer to the platform, her eyes tracing the carved lines. The patterns flowed across the crystal's surface in organized rows. Each symbol was different, yet they followed a clear structure. Some were simple, just a few lines. Others were elaborate, with dozens of interconnected shapes. Something tickled at the back of her mind. She had seen patterns like this before. "May I ask a question?" Jimin said carefully. Vexthar made a gesture that his translator rendered as assent. "Have you cataloged these symbols? Compared them across different artifacts?" "Of course," Scholar Nira said, her translator giving her voice a musical quality. "We have documented over 10,000 distinct symbols from First One's sites. No two are exactly alike. This confirms their decorative purpose." Jimin moved around the platform, viewing the tablet from different angles. Her heart started beating faster. What if they're not decorative? Vexthar's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "Dr. Park, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we have studied these symbols for decades. The greatest minds in the galaxy have examined them. They form no linguistic pattern. They encode no information we can detect. But have you considered that they might be numbers?" The room fell silent. Scholar Nira's wings stopped their gentle flutter. Vexthar stared at Jimin with both eyes, his head tilting. Then the High Scholar made a sound that the translator couldn't quite capture, but that clearly meant laughter. "Numbers?" Vexthar said. "Dr. Park, we know what numbers look like. Every civilization in the galaxy uses similar mathematical notation. These symbols bear no resemblance to any numerical system. That's because you're only looking at base 10 systems, Jimin said. The words tumbling out faster now. Or maybe base 8 for the chitin, base 16 for the methane breathers. But humans developed dozens of different numerical systems on Earth. Babylonian base 60, Mayan base 20, binary, hexadecimal. We learned to think in multiple mathematical languages. Scholar Nira moved closer, her compound eyes reflecting the crystal's light. What are you suggesting? I think this is a base 12 system, Jimin said, pointing at the tablet. Look at how the symbols progress. Simple marks for the first units, more complex combinations for larger values. And here, see how this section repeats with variations? That's what happens in positional notation when you're representing different magnitudes. Vexthar's scales darkened to a deep indigo. Dr. Park, you have been on this station for less than 1 hour. You have no expertise in First One's archaeology, and you are suggesting that you have discovered something that has eluded the greatest scholars in the galaxy for 40 years? I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Jimin said, though she could feel her face getting hot. I'm just saying that humans might see patterns differently because we learned so many different ways to count. Humans, Vexthar said, and his translator made the word sound almost insulting. You have been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. Your species still uses primitive chemical rockets for local travel, and you think you can waltz in here and overturn decades of careful research with a single glance? Other researchers had gathered near the entrance, drawn by the raised voices. Jimin could feel their eyes on her. Some seemed curious, but most looked skeptical or amused. I could prove it, Jimin said quietly. If you gave me access to the database of symbols and 2 days to analyze them? Vexthar's scales shifted through several colors. That would be a waste of time and resources. However, since you are so confident, I will grant your request. But when you fail to find any meaningful pattern, I expect you to accept that there are things humans simply cannot understand yet. Do we have an agreement? Jimin met his gaze. Yes, High Scholar. We have an agreement. Good. Vexthar turned away. Scholar Nira, please show Dr. Park to her quarters and grant her access to the public database. The rest of us have actual work to do. As the High Scholar left, several of the gathered researchers laughed and returned to their tasks. But Scholar Nira remained, her wings fluttering softly. You really think they're numbers? The insectoid asked quietly. Jimin looked back at the crystal tablet, at the symbols that everyone else dismissed as meaningless decoration. I don't think it, Scholar Nira, I know it. And if I'm right, we've been looking at technical manuals and thinking they were art for 40 years. Scholar Nira's translator was silent for a moment. Then it said, I hope you are correct, Dr. Park. For all our sakes, I truly hope you are correct. Jimin's quarters were small but functional, with a sleeping alcove, a desk, and a window showing the stars. She ignored the bed and went straight to the computer terminal. Scholar Nira had granted her access to the database as promised, though Jimin noticed it was limited to public files only. The restricted archives remained locked. She pulled up the first catalog of First One symbols and began her work. Hours passed. The station's artificial day-night cycle dimmed the lights, but Jimin kept working. She pulled up image after image, arranging them on multiple screens. The symbols from the crystal tablet. Symbols from pottery fragments. Wall carvings from temples. Metal plates from what might have been warehouses or libraries. Patterns began to emerge. The simplest symbols appeared most frequently. More complex symbols appeared in specific sequences. When she organized them by complexity, they formed a clear progression. It was exactly what you would expect from a numerical system. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, building a comparison chart. She mapped symbols that appeared to represent the same value across different artifacts. The consistency was remarkable. Whoever the first ones were, they had used the same mathematical notation across their entire civilization for thousands of years. By the time the artificial sun rose, Jimin had identified what she believed were the first 30 numbers in the system. Base 12, as she had suspected. 12 fingers or 12 months in their year, maybe. The reason didn't matter. What mattered was the pattern. She reached for her personal communication device and opened a quantum channel to Earth. The connection took several minutes to establish, and the cost would eat most of her monthly salary, but she needed to talk to someone who would understand. Dr. Choi, it's Jimin. I'm sorry about the time difference. The screen flickered, showing a tired face framed by messy hair. Dr. Minji Choi had been Jimin's professor at university, and they had stayed in touch after graduation. Minji was one of the best mathematicians on Earth, specializing in abstract number theory. Jimin, it's 3 in the morning here. This better be important. I found something. At the archive station. I need you to check my work. Minji sat up straighter, suddenly alert. Send it. Jimin transmitted her analysis files and waited while Minji's computer processed them. She watched her old professor's face as she studied the patterns, seeing the moment when understanding dawned. Oh my God. Minji whispered. Jimin, these are numbers. These are definitely numbers. I know. But there's more. Look at the complex sequences. Minji scrolled through the data, her eyes widening. These aren't just counting systems. These are equations. Jimin, what kind of artifact are these from? Everything. They're everywhere in the ruins. Thousands of artifacts all covered in these symbols, and the alien scholars think they're decorative. How is that possible? Any mathematician would recognize these patterns. Because they only know one way to count, Jimin said. Their species each developed one numerical system and stuck with it. They never had different cultures creating different mathematics. They can't see what we see. Minji leaned back in her chair, running her hands through her hair. Do you realize what this means? If these are equations, then every artifact you've found is potentially a technical document. Specifications, coordinates, formulas. 40 years of data that hasn't been read. I know. I'm trying to build a translation key, but I need help. Some of these equations are incredibly complex. Send me everything you have. I'll get our team on it immediately. We'll work in shifts. Minji paused, her expression turning serious. Jimin, be careful. If you're right about this, you're about to make a lot of important people look very foolish. I already started, Jimin admitted. The high scholar laughed at me yesterday. Of course he did. Just document everything carefully, and watch your back. After ending the call, Jimin returned to her analysis. She worked through the day, stopping only when hunger forced her to visit the station's cafeteria. She ate quickly, avoiding the other researchers, then hurried back to her quarters. The door chime rang just as artificial night fell again. Jimin opened it to find Scholar Nira standing outside, looking nervous. The insectoid's wings twitched rapidly. May I come in? Nira asked. I would prefer not to be seen talking with you. Jimin stepped aside and Nira entered quickly. The door sealed behind her. I have been thinking about what you said, Nira began, about the symbols being numbers. So I reviewed some of my own research from years ago, artifacts that we classified as decorative or religious. She produced a data chip from a pouch in her carapace. I've found something. Patterns that repeat across multiple sites. I never questioned it before, but now I wonder if these might be what you called equations. Jimin took the chip with shaking hands. This is from the restricted archives. Yes, I could lose my position for sharing it. But if you are correct, Dr. Park, then we have wasted 40 years. How many more years should we waste because of pride? Thank you, Jimin said. Thank you for trusting me. I do not know if I trust you yet, Nira said honestly. But I trust that you believe what you are saying. And I have seen too many mysteries in my career to dismiss any possibility. She moved toward the door. I was never here. And if High Scholar Vexthar asks, I think your theory is ridiculous. After Nira left, Jimin loaded the data chip. Her screens filled with images from restricted dig sites, intact machines, complete wall murals, sealed containers with symbols etched into their surfaces. All of it covered in the numerical language she was learning to read. She worked through another night, cross-referencing patterns, building her translation key. Some symbols appeared only in specific contexts. Those might be operators, she thought, like plus or minus signs. Others seemed to modify the symbols around them, perhaps indicating decimal points or exponents. By the second day, Minji and her Earth team had processed the data and sent back their analysis. They confirmed Jimin's base 12 theory and had identified what appeared to be mathematical constants in some of the equations. One value kept appearing across multiple artifacts, and its frequency suggested it might be important, like pi or the speed of light. Jimin was mapping this constant's appearances when she noticed something that made her breath catch. The equations weren't random. They formed sequences, and some of those sequences looked like coordinates. She pulled up a star chart and began plotting the values, converting them from base 12 to base 10. The first sequence pointed to a location on Velnar Prime's surface. She checked the archaeological records. That location had been excavated 8 years ago. Nothing unusual had been found there, but the second sequence pointed to a location that had never been explored. It was in the southern hemisphere, far from any known ruins. According to surveys, it was just empty rock. Jimin's hands trembled as she plotted more coordinates. They all pointed to unexplored locations, and they all came from the crystal tablet that the scholars had dismissed as decorative art. She needed to present this to the High Scholar immediately. Jimin gathered her data and headed for Vexthar's office. She found him in a conference room with several other senior researchers, reviewing reports on holographic displays. "High Scholar, I need to show you something." Vexthar didn't look up from his work. "Dr. Park, your 2 days are not yet complete." "I know, but this can't wait. I've translated some of the symbols. They're coordinates." Now Vexthar looked at her. His scales darkened. "Dr. Park, we have been patient with your enthusiasm, but this is becoming disruptive. You have been here for 2 days, and you claim to have translated a language that has defied the greatest minds in the galaxy for 40 years. Do you understand how absurd that sounds?" "I can prove it," Jimin said. She activated her datapad and projected the crystal tablet's image. "These sequences here, they're stellar coordinates in base 12. When converted, they point to specific locations on Velnar Prime, locations that haven't been excavated yet." One of the other researchers, a floating methane breather, rippled with what its translator called laughter. "And I suppose you expect us to mount an expensive expedition based on your 2 days of work?" "Yes," Jimin said simply. "Because if I'm right, there's something at these coordinates. Something the first ones wanted us to find." Vexithar stood, his full height impressive. "Dr. Park, you have until tomorrow morning to complete your analysis. Then you will present your findings to a full council review. If you cannot prove your claims, you will return to Earth. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, High Scholar." As Jimin left the conference room, she heard the laughter following her. But she also heard Scholar Nira's voice, quiet and thoughtful. "What if she's right?" The council chamber was circular, with seats arranged in rising tiers around a central presentation platform. Representatives from 24 species filled the room, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Jimin stood on the platform, her datapad connected to the holographic projector, and tried not to think about how her career might end in the next hour. High Scholar Vexthar sat in the highest tier, his scales a neutral gray. Scholar Nira was there too, her wings perfectly still. Captain Hyun had come up from the docking bay, representing human interests. And there in the diplomatic section sat Counselor Tay, Earth's representative to this sector of the Galactic Council. "Dr. Park," Vexthar said formally, "you have requested this emergency session to present evidence that the first one's symbols are numerical in nature. You may proceed." Jimin took a breath and activated her first hologram. The crystal tablet appeared above the platform, rotating slowly. "Thank you, High Scholar. I want to start by talking about how humans learn to count." Several council members shifted in their seats. This was not how academic presentations usually began. On Earth, humans developed independently in different regions. Each culture created its own way to represent numbers. The Babylonians used base 60. The Mayans used base 20. The Chinese used counting rods. The Romans used letters. We had dozens of different systems and we learned to think in all of them. "Fascinating history lesson," Vexthar said dryly. "But what does this have to do with the first ones?" "Everything," Jimin said. "Because when I look at these symbols, I see a base 12 numerical system. But you don't. Not because you're not smart enough, but because your species each developed one perfect mathematical language and never needed another. You can't see numbers that don't look like your numbers." She changed the hologram, showing a comparison chart. "Here are the first 12 symbols from the tablet, arranged by frequency and context. Notice how they appear in sequential order on multiple artifacts. Notice how the simplest forms appear most often, exactly as you'd expect for lower numbers in any counting system." A Chithan researcher clicked its mandibles. "Coincidence? Frequency analysis of decorative patterns often shows similar distributions." "Fair point," Jimin acknowledged. "So let me show you the equations." She pulled up a new image, this one showing a complex sequence of symbols from a temple wall. This sequence appears on 17 different artifacts across 6 different First One sites. If these are decorative, why the exact repetition? But if they're mathematical notation, then this is an equation that was important enough to record everywhere. She worked through the translation, showing how each symbol converted to base 12 numbers, then to base 10 for comparison. The equation emerged on the hologram and several council members leaned forward. "That's a formula for gravitational force," someone said. "Yes," Jimin confirmed. "Adjusted for base 12 notation, it's functionally identical to what we use today. The first ones knew gravity, understood mathematics, and wrote it down using these symbols." The chamber filled with murmurs. Vexthar raised a hand for silence. "One equation proves nothing. It could still be coincidence." "Then let me show you 60 more equations," Jimin said. She displayed them rapid fire, each one translating from symbols to mathematics, formulas for energy, mass, velocity, radiation, constants that matched known physical laws. "These aren't decorative, High Scholar. These are technical specifications." "Impossible," the methane breather from before said. "We have studied these sites for decades." "You studied them without being able to read them," Jimin said. She tried to keep her voice respectful, but frustration leaked through. "You found technical manuals and thought they were art. You found computers and thought they were sculptures. Because you couldn't read the numbers written on them." Counselor Tay spoke up, his voice calm. "Dr. Park, this is a significant claim. Do you have proof beyond pattern matching? Something we can verify independently?" "Yes, Counselor, coordinates." Jimin brought up the crystal tablet again, highlighting specific sequences. "These symbols here represent spatial coordinates in three-dimensional space, using Velnar Prime as the origin point. When translated, they point to 7 locations on the planet's surface. 6 of them are known archaeological sites. The 7th has never been explored." She projected a map of Velnar Prime, with markers showing the 6 known sites and 1 new location in the southern hemisphere. "The 7th coordinate is here. According to surface scans, it's just bedrock and sand, no ruins visible from orbit." "And you believe something is hidden there?" Vexthar asked. "The first ones told us something is there. They carved these coordinates into their most important tablet, the one kept in their primary temple. That's not random decoration, High Scholar. That's a message." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some called for immediate excavation. Others demanded more verification. A few still insisted the whole thing was human arrogance and pattern-seeking bias. Finally, Vexthar stood, and the room fell silent. "Very well, Dr. Park. We will test your theory. An expedition will depart for these coordinates immediately. If we find something, we will consider your translation. If we find nothing, you will return to Earth and this matter will be closed." "Agreed," Jimin said. 3 hours later, Jimin stood in the cargo bay of a surface transport, wearing an environmental suit and double-checking her equipment. Captain Hyun was piloting. Scholar Nira had insisted on coming. Even Vexithar had joined the expedition, though his scales showed colors Jimin had learned meant anger and skepticism. The transport dropped through Velnar Prime's thin atmosphere. The planet was a wasteland, its oceans long evaporated, its cities collapsed to dust. They flew over ancient highways that went nowhere, and foundations of buildings that had held millions of lives. "Approaching coordinates now," Captain Hyun announced. Jimin pressed against the viewport. Below, the surface looked exactly like the scans had shown. Reddish sand stretched in all directions. Some rocks jutted up here and there. Nothing that looked like ruins. They landed in a swirl of dust. The team disembarked, and Jimin immediately pulled out a ground-penetrating scanner. She walked in a search pattern, watching the display. "Nothing," Vexthar said after 10 minutes. "There is nothing here, Dr. Park." "Give me a moment," Jimin said. She rechecked her coordinates, converting the math twice to be sure. This was the right location. The tablet had pointed here specifically. There had to be something. She expanded the scanner's depth range, pushing it to maximum. The display flickered, and then something appeared. Deep underground, below layers of compressed sediment, the scanner showed a void. A large void with regular geometric boundaries. "There," Jimin breathed. 40 meters down. There's a chamber. Scholar Nira verified the reading with her own equipment. She's correct. Something artificial is down there. Captain Hyun contacted the station and requested excavation equipment. It arrived within the hour, along with a larger team and proper drilling gear. They worked through the day and into the night, their lights bright against Velnar Prime's darkness. The drill broke through at 38 meters. Air hissed out of the hole, stale but not toxic. Jimin's suit sensors detected trace amounts of power, incredibly faint but definitely there. They widened the opening and sent down a camera first. The feed showed a chamber carved from solid rock, its walls smooth and precise. And in the center of the chamber, sitting on a raised platform, was a machine. It was cube-shaped, about 3 meters on each side, made of a dark metal that reflected their lights with a subtle blue sheen. Every surface was covered in symbols. The numerical language of the first ones. "We need to go down there," Jimin said. They rigged a descent line and went down one at a time. Jimin went first, her boots touching the chamber floor with a soft thud. The air was dry and cold. The machine hummed at a frequency she felt more than heard. Vexithar descended next, followed by Nira and 3 other researchers. They gathered around the machine, scanning it with every instrument they had. "It's still powered," Nira said, her voice awed. "After 2 million years, it still has power." Jimin circled the machine, reading the symbols carved into its surface. Instructions, warnings, and something else. "This is a computer," she said. "A data storage device. And these symbols here, they're telling us how to activate it." "Absolutely not," Vexthar said immediately. "We have no idea what this machine does. We need to study it for months, maybe years, before attempting activation." "High Scholar, with respect, the first ones left us instructions. They wanted this machine to be found and activated by qualified researchers who understand the technology, not by someone who has been here for 3 days. Jimin turned to face him. "I can read the instructions." "Can you?" Vexthar's scales rippled through several colors. Behind his helmet visor, his eyes narrowed. Then slowly he gestured to the machine. "Read them to me. Every word. If Scholar Nira confirms your translation, and if the Council approves by remote vote, then we will consider activation." Jimin moved to the front panel and began translating. The symbols told a story of a great civilization preparing for its end, of knowledge preserved for whoever might come after. The machine contained their history, their science, their warning. "Warning," Jimin read the last line. The activation sequence required touching specific symbols in a precise order. Jimin's hands trembled inside her suit gloves as she traced the pattern on the machine's surface. The metal felt warm despite the chamber's cold air. Each symbol she touched glowed with a soft blue light that persisted after her finger moved on. "Are you certain about this sequence?" Vexthar asked. He stood close behind her, watching every movement. "The instructions are very clear," Jimin said. She touched the 9th symbol, then the 10th. 2 more. The machine's hum increased in pitch. The blue glow spread across its surface like water, illuminating thousands of symbols in cascading waves. The chamber filled with light. Jimin touched the final 2 symbols. The machine's top surface split along invisible seams, sections sliding apart with perfect precision. Light poured from the opening, followed by a holographic projection that filled the chamber. The first ones appeared before them. The hologram showed tall beings, roughly humanoid but with elongated limbs and large eyes. They wore simple clothing and carried themselves with quiet dignity. The projection showed them building cities, exploring space, creating art and science, a civilization at its height, confident and curious. "This is incredible," Scholar Nira whispered. "We're seeing them." The first ones, after 2 million years, the hologram shifted. The first ones' cities were burning. Ships fell from the sky. Beings fled in panic. And in the darkness of space above them, something approached. The projection couldn't quite show what it was, just a sense of wrongness, of geometry that hurt to perceive. Text appeared in the air, written in the numerical language. Jimin began translating. "We were not the first and we will not be the last. The Devourers come from beyond the rim of the galaxy every 40,000 years. They feed on energy, on life, on the electromagnetic spectrum itself. We fought them with everything we had. We lost." The hologram showed weapons firing, shields holding briefly, then failing, entire star systems going dark. The first ones had been advanced beyond anything the current galaxy had achieved, and they had been crushed. "We are leaving this record for whoever comes after," Jimin continued. "We have hidden weapons, defenses, and knowledge across 300 worlds. Learn our language. Find our caches. Prepare for their return. They will come. They always come." Captain Hyun's voice came through on their communication channel from the surface. "Dr. Park, we're recording everything. The entire Galactic Council is watching this transmission." Jimin nodded, her eyes still on the hologram. "Then they're about to see something they won't like." The projection changed, showing a timeline marked in the first one's numerical system. Minji and her team had sent Jimin the conversion factors for first one's time measurement. Jimin did the math in her head, converting their years to standard galactic years. The last attack was 2 million years ago, she said. The cycle repeats every 40,000 years. That means we've missed 50 cycles. But the Devourers don't come to lifeless worlds. They come when civilizations reach a certain level of development, when there's enough energy to feed on. The hologram zoomed out, showing the galaxy. Thousands of lights marked active civilizations, the current galactic community, spread across hundreds of systems using energy and broadcasting signals into space. We're visible now, Scholar Nira said softly. We're making enough noise for them to find us. The hologram shifted one last time, showing a calculation. The numbers were clear even before Jimin translated them. They estimate the Devourers will detect us and arrive within the next 200 years. Maybe less. Vexthar's scales had turned a pale, sickly color. 200 years. That's not enough time. It's what we have, Jimin said. And the first ones left us everything we need to prepare. Weapons, shields, the science to understand the Devourers. It's all out there waiting to be found. But we have to be able to read their language to find it. The machine began projecting new holograms, these ones showing star maps with hundreds of marked locations. Each mark had coordinates written in the numerical language beside it. Cache locations, knowledge repositories, weapon installations, all of it preserved and waiting for 2 million years. This is why the coordinates were on the tablet, Jimin said. This site was just the beginning. A starting point. The first ones created a network of hidden facilities across the galaxy. They knew they would lose, but they wanted to give the next civilization a fighting chance. Captain Hyun's voice came through again, tight with emotion. Jimin, the council is going silent. I think they're understanding what this means. Good, Jimin said. She looked at Vexthar. Hi, Scholar, we wasted 40 years because we couldn't read numbers. How many more years should we waste? Vexthar was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice formal and careful. Scholar Nira, please note for the official record that Dr. Park's translation appears to be accurate. The symbols are indeed numerical in nature. Her theory is confirmed. Noted, High Scholar, Nira said. Captain Hyun, please inform the Galactic Council that we need to convene an emergency session immediately. Every archaeological site we've ever excavated needs to be re-examined. Every artifact needs to be translated. We need to contact Dr. Minji Choi on Earth and request her team's assistance. And we need to start mounting expeditions to these cache locations as soon as possible. Understood. High Scholar. Vexthar turned to Jimin. His scales were slowly returning to their normal colors, though they still flickered with distress. Dr. Park, I owe you an apology. I dismissed your work because of pride and prejudice. You were correct and I was wrong. That error may have cost us decades of preparation time. The error was shared by the entire scientific community, Jimin said gently. You couldn't see what you weren't looking for. But you could. Why? What makes human perception different? Jimin thought about how to explain it. Earth had hundreds of different cultures, all developing independently. We created different languages, different writing systems, different ways to think about mathematics. A child on Earth learns that there are many ways to represent the same number. 10x, binary, 1010, hexadecimal A, tally marks, Roman numerals. We learn flexibility early. We expect diversity of thought. While we developed one unified system and never questioned it, Vexthar said. Efficiency over flexibility. Different strengths, Jimin said. Your species achieved space travel centuries before humans did. You built this incredible research station. You preserved these sites carefully for decades. We're good at different things. That's why cooperation matters. A message flashed across Jimin's suit display. An emergency meeting request from the Galactic Council, scheduled to begin in 2 hours. All senior researchers were required to attend. The subject line simply said, Response to Devourer Threat. We should return to the station, Vexthar said. There is much to do. They ascended from the chamber, leaving the machine running. It would stay active now, broadcasting its warning and its hope to anyone who could read it. More teams would come to study it in detail, to extract every bit of information it contained. On the surface, the excavation site had transformed into a full research camp. Prefabricated structures were being erected. Ships were landing and taking off constantly. The news had spread fast and everyone wanted to be part of the response. During the flight back to the station, Jimin sat next to Scholar Nira. The insectoid had been quiet since leaving the chamber. Are you all right? Jimin asked. I am processing, Nira said. 200 years seems like a long time. But it is not. It is barely enough time to prepare, even with the first one's help. And if we fail to translate their weapons correctly, if we misunderstand their science because we cannot read their numbers properly, then we will die as they died. We won't fail, Jimin said with more confidence than she felt. We know what we're facing now, and we're not alone. The first ones left us a gift. We just need to use it. Back at the station, chaos reigned. Every researcher was working at maximum speed, pulling up old data and re-examining it with new understanding. What had been classified as art was now being recognized as technical documentation. Decorative pottery turned out to be chemical formulas. Temple murals were star charts and weapon specifications. Jimin found her quarters and collapsed into her chair, exhausted. She had been awake for almost 2 days straight. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the hologram of the first one's cities burning. 200 years. It sounded like forever, but it would pass in a blink. And the galaxy needed to be ready. Her communication terminal chimed. A message from Earth. Dr. Minji Choi and a team of 50 mathematicians were boarding a ship. They would arrive at the station within a month. More would follow. Earth was sending its best minds to help translate the first one's legacy. Another message came through. This one from the Galactic Council. They were requesting Dr. Jimin Park's presence at a special ceremony tomorrow. They were awarding her the title of High Scholar of Ancient Mathematics, the youngest High Scholar in galactic history. Jimin smiled tiredly. The title was nice, but it wasn't why she'd done this. She'd done it because someone needed to read the warning. Someone needed to see the numbers that everyone else had missed. She pulled up the star maps showing the cache locations, hundreds of dots scattered across the galaxy, each one representing. 6 months had passed since the machine awakened beneath Velnar Prime, and the galaxy was a different place. High Scholar Jimin Park stood in the newly constructed translation center, watching hundreds of researchers from dozens of species work at holographic terminals. Each station showed First One's artifacts, and beside each artifact sat a human mathematician working with an alien partner. The room hummed with activity and quiet conversation. The team at Site 47 has completed their translation, Scholar Nira reported, flying up beside Jimin. It's a shield generator facility, fully intact. The Velkrite military is preparing to excavate it now. Jimin marked the location on her master map. 47 sites fully translated. 108 in progress. 273 still waiting for teams to reach them. The galaxy was racing against time, and they were starting to win. Any word from Captain Hyun's expedition? Jimin asked. His team reached the weapons cache in the Outer Rim 3 days ago. Initial reports are promising. The weapons still have power, and the instruction manuals are extensive. Dr. Minji's translation team should have them fully decoded within a week. Jimin nodded, feeling a small measure of relief. Every cache they opened was another piece of the puzzle. Every translation brought them closer to understanding what the first ones had built. And every weapon they reactivated was another tool to fight back when the Devourers arrived. Her communicator buzzed. A message from the Galactic Council requesting her presence in the main chamber. Jimin sighed. She had spent more time in council meetings over the past 6 months than she'd spent doing actual research. The politics of saving the galaxy were exhausting. She found Counselor Tay waiting for her outside the chamber. The human diplomat looked tired but pleased. Good news, Tay said. The council has approved your proposal for the Institute of Cognitive Diversity. Full funding, facilities on Earth and 3 other core worlds, and authorization to recruit students from every member species. That's wonderful, Jimin said. And she meant it. The Institute would teach species to think in multiple mathematical frameworks, to see patterns from different perspectives. It would take years to show results, but every student they trained would be able to help translate First One's knowledge faster. There's more, Tay continued. High Scholar Vexthar has formally requested to join your institute as a senior researcher. He wants to be the first non-human to teach his species a new way to count. Jimin felt a smile tug at her lips. Vexthar had changed over the past 6 months. The proud, dismissive scholar had transformed into one of her strongest allies. He'd published 3 papers on cognitive bias in archaeological research and had become an advocate for intellectual diversity. Tell him yes, Jimin said. We need people who understand how hard it is to change your thinking. He'll be perfect for teaching others. The council session was brief but important. Admiral Cross, the Velkrite military commander, presented an update on defense preparations. They'd reactivated 17 weapons platforms using First One's technology. The devices could generate shields strong enough to protect entire planets, but they required enormous power. The galaxy was building fusion reactors at unprecedented speed. After the meeting, Jimin returned to her quarters. She had a personal project she'd been working on, something that wouldn't be ready for years, but that might matter when the Devourers finally arrived. The First One's machine had contained more than just warnings and weapons caches. It had contained cultural records, music, art, literature, philosophy. The First Ones had wanted future civilizations to know who they were, not just what they'd built. Jimin had spent her spare time translating their stories, tales of exploration and discovery, of love and loss, of a civilization that had reached for the stars and touched them. They were beautiful, and they were heartbreaking. The First Ones had known they were dying, and they'd wanted to be remembered. She was halfway through translating what seemed to be an epic poem when her terminal chimed. A priority message from one of the distant research teams. Jimin opened it, expecting another progress report. Instead, she found herself staring at an image that made her heart skip. The archaeological team at Site 103 had found something unusual. A First One's facility that wasn't on any of the cache lists. The structure was massive, buried beneath ice on a frozen world and covered in symbols that didn't quite match the standard numerical language. Dr. Choi? Jimin opened a channel to Earth where Minji was coordinating the translation network. Minji's face appeared on the screen, looking curious. "What's wrong?" "You look worried. Look at this." Jimin transmitted the image. The symbols are similar to standard First One's numerals, but different, like a dialect or variant. Minji studied them for a moment, then her eyes widened. "Jimin, these aren't just numbers. Look at the complexity. These are musical notation. Musical notation. Mathematics and music are connected. Different cultures express them differently, but the relationship is always there. The First Ones must have had multiple ways to encode information. We've been so focused on their mathematical language that we missed their musical one." Jimin felt a chill run down her spine. How much information could they have encoded in music that we've been ignoring? "I don't know, but we need to find out." Within hours, a new team was assembled. Human musicians, alien acoustic specialists, and xenolinguists all converged on Site 103. Jimin wanted to go herself, but she was needed at the translation center. Instead, she sent a young researcher named Yuna, a talented graduate student who had degrees in both mathematics and music composition. Yuna was nervous but excited. "I won't let you down, High Scholar," she'd promised before boarding her ship. "I know you won't," Jimin had replied. "Trust your instincts. You're seeing patterns we haven't noticed. That's not a weakness. It's your strength." The days waiting for Yuna's report felt endless. Jimin threw herself into other translations, working with teams across the galaxy. Each cache they opened revealed more pieces of the First One's legacy. Advanced engines, medical technology that could cure diseases the galaxy had thought incurable, agricultural techniques that could feed billions. But it was the weapons that drew the most attention. The galaxy was building an armada unlike anything that had existed in modern history. Ships equipped with First One shields and energy weapons, defensive networks around populated worlds, detection systems that could spot approaching threats light years away. Admiral Cross had presented the military's timeline at the last council meeting. They needed at least 150 years to prepare adequately. They had maybe 200 before the Devourers arrived. The margin for error was thin, but it existed. Finally, Yuna's report arrived. The facility at Site 103 was a library, but not a library of books or data files. It was a library of music. The First Ones had encoded vast amounts of information into musical compositions, using pitch and rhythm and harmony to represent complex ideas. And they'd done it because music could survive where other forms of communication might fail. Sound could travel through different mediums, could be remembered and passed down even without technology. Yuna had decoded the first piece. It was a symphony that described the Devourers in more detail than any of the mathematical records. The First Ones had studied their enemy, had learned its patterns and weaknesses, and they'd written it all down in a form that was harder to corrupt or destroy than simple data storage. "This changes everything," Dr. Minji said during their next call. "If they encoded critical information in multiple formats, we need to re-examine every First One site. Art, music, architecture, anything that might carry meaning. "We're running out of time," Jimin said. "We can't translate everything in 200 years. Then we teach others to translate. Not just mathematics, but every form of communication. We make the galaxy fluent in First One's language in all its forms." It was an ambitious plan, perhaps an impossible one, but they had to try. Jimin drafted a proposal and presented it to the council. The response was unanimous approval. Resources flooded into the translation effort. Schools across the galaxy added First One studies to their curriculum. Children learned to count in base 12 alongside their native systems. Musicians studied ancient compositions looking for hidden messages. Humanity, once the newest and least respected member of the Galactic Council, became its teachers. Human researchers spread across known space, showing other species how to think flexibly, how to see patterns from multiple perspectives, how to embrace cognitive diversity as a strength. Years passed. 10 years, 2030. The galaxy transformed. New technologies emerged from translated caches. Ships became faster. Shields grew stronger. The military network expanded across hundreds of systems, and people changed too. Young beings of every species grew up learning multiple mathematical languages, multiple artistic traditions, multiple ways of seeing the universe. They called themselves the flexible generation, and they were everything the galaxy needed them to be. Jimin, now in her 60s, watched from the translation center as Yuna, now a high scholar herself, led a team of young researchers in decoding a newly discovered First One's facility. They moved with confidence and creativity, combining insights from different fields,